My name is Becky Hampton, and I support the work at the agency for the local classroom reviews, along with Victoria Garrett, who you heard from at the top of the webinar, and also Shay Wise Garland. So thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. And we have a lot to share, and we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to engage with the content and ask questions. So without further ado, let's dive right in here on the overview of the local classroom reviews. So in our afternoon together here, the purpose is to provide the overview, as I said, but also highlighting some of the key updates that were made to the process for the local classroom reviews to align with statutory requirements and the processes that are going to support that implementation during the 25-26 school year. So we'll dive more into that with each and every slide, but that's our purpose of our hour together this afternoon. Our objectives this afternoon we have three. The first one is to discuss some of the strategic shifts in the local classroom review process to prepare for effective implementation in the 25-26 school year. The second one is to review two central or driving questions that are going to define the focus of the local classroom review for the upcoming school year. And then finally, the third one, to provide an overview of the scoring and reviewer training processes that are going to support the implementation and to highlight anywhere or stamp anywhere where there might be some changes or some shifts to previous work. But before we begin, we wanted to start with what is a local classroom review. And so the next few slides are just an overview as we dive right in. And when we take a look at this timeline, I really want to just highlight three specific things because I think it's important, I think it's important to remember that HB 1605 really began in June 2023 in the 88th regular session. And so just now, as you move forward on the timeline, as you all know, in November 2024, the SBOE voted for SBOE approved materials, which does have an impact on local classroom reviews, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the two things I want to draw your attention to are situated in April 2025, and that is when the SBOE approved rules for the local classroom reviews along with the rubrics. So that is a very big driver in a lot of the shifts that were needed to be made after April 11th, 2025. So just want to draw your attention there. And then last but not least, in September 2025, you can see that we have two major events happening there as well, where we will be able to launch the grants for the local classroom reviews to be able to pay for parent requests and district ad hoc requests. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And the other thing that I want to stamp is that we also have commissioners' rules for local classroom reviews that become effective as well. So those two things, the State Board of Education and the commissioners' rules, are really a driver for what we're about to engage with in terms of content. So let's begin. As we mentioned, HB 1605 really began with many different elements, but you can see highlighted on screen to the top right there are that the local classroom reviews are going to be established, funded, and can be initiated now via parent requests. And so that is very different from any of the requests that we fielded previously. So we're going to spend a little time about talking about that. And the other thing that you can see, another pivotal piece, the SBOE approval of a grade level rigor rubric. And as we mentioned, that happened April 11th, 2025. So it makes us ready to move forward with our work in the 25-26 school year. And as a reminder, just really important to ground us all in remembering that after HB 1605, of course, state support, more support is provided, but that instructional materials decisions really remain at the local level. And so those are some of the citations, but something that we always encourage parents and our stakeholders to ground ourselves in is that districts have the local discretion to recommend or require, or neither one, the use of certain instructional materials within their classrooms, whether they be SBOE approved or not SBOE approved. Okay, And this is the star of the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is chapter 31, where the local classroom reviews language and statute is positioned. So we will engage with this particular content in several different ways throughout our time together, but I really want to point out two specific things as we look at it from the top. The first one is to really stay anchored in the fact that it is situated in chapter 31, which is parental rights and responsibilities. So you will see a huge emphasis on parental line of sight, parental visibility, and transparency as we work our way through the content this afternoon. The other thing that you'll see in section 31.0252 is the official full name of the local classroom reviews. And so you will notice that one of the shifts that we have made is we are working away from the term academic review has been replaced by local classroom reviews, and that's to align to statutory language, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. The other thing that I want to highlight here on this slide in the bolded text is those are the two focus areas for the local classroom reviews in the 25-26 school year. So in other words, the materials that are being submitted for the local classroom review, do they correspond with what the district adopted? Question one. And then question two, do those assignments, what is submitted by the district, actually meet the grade level rigor? So numerals 1 and numeral 2 are something that we'll see again, but definitely want to orient everyone on the call to the language that is actually in chapter 31 and really kind of drives what we're doing moving forward. All right, at a very, very high level, a summary of the local classroom review for 25-26 under HB 1605. And it's really, really important to stamp here that the local classroom review is designed to answer those two questions that we just looked at in statute. So the purpose of evaluation is going to be to see, question one, how consistently are those materials used in the classroom aligned to those adopted by the school or the school system? And the second purpose is how consistently those assignments are going to be issued to students are on grade level and meet rigor. In 24-25, as you know, the term academic review was used, and we were really driving at TEKS and RB's alignment. So I want to stamp here a shift in the purpose of the evaluation up top here with questions 1 and 2. Then you can see what is adopted, or pardon me, what is evaluated. And you can see numbers 1 and number 2 situated again, coming directly from the statute. And then we want to take a look at the scope of the review. So these are local classroom reviews are indeed just that, the grain size on the reviews, classroom level, right? So campus, no. District, no. We're actually talking about a parent requested local classroom review would be at the classroom level. So what materials are evaluated? Blank student assignments. That hasn't changed. Who is conducting the evaluation? It is our wonderful partners, certified reviewers from our ESCs or approved vendors. So definitely want to feature that here on who's conducting the evaluation. And then when are things going to be evaluated? So part of the rulemaking established for these ad hoc parent or district requests as part of local classroom reviews, the rules state that the submission window, the statewide submission window, would begin September 1st and extend through the last day, the last instructional day for students. So definitely want to name and sort of stamp that is a change. That means we could have requests coming in all year long that are district or parent requests for local classroom reviews. So definitely something for our leads to think about in terms of the traffic around local classroom reviews wouldn't just be positioned in certain months as it has been previously. It could extend all year long. And then finally, how are these results going to be reported? They're going to be in a local classroom review report. We'll take a look at that in just a moment as we get deeper into the slides. But there definitely will be some differences that we'll want to stamp there. All right. So what materials are we evaluating in a local classroom review? All of you will be familiar with the blank student assignments that you see on screen. Really important to name here that the source of the assignments is irrelevant. The rubrics can be applied no matter what source of the materials we're engaging with. However, at this orange triangle here down at the bottom left, you will see stamped a difference in the 25-26 school year in terms of the local classroom review. So the local classroom review is going to also gather 1 week's worth of lesson materials to be included in the report for maximum parental transparency. And so, as you can imagine, that will impact the submission guidance for our LEAs. And we will talk more about that as we get deeper into the presentation. But there will be other materials besides the blank student assignments that will be gathered and returned in the report so that parents have line of sight to what their children are engaging with in a week's worth of lesson material. Okay, as I mentioned, April 11th, 2025, pretty big day for local classroom reviews because the SBOE approved the rubrics. And as you all know, great care from our partners at ESCs were taken to adjust the IMRA rubrics so that they could be applied to student-facing assignments. Do want to mention here that this ensures that the local classroom reviews are aligned to the IMRA process, but not duplicating the IMRA process. I also want to mention that prior to the April 11th approval date by SBOE, we spent the better part of February and March on a listening tour to gather feedback from the public on those particular rubrics as they were open for public comment. This included our ESC partners. This included community members, parents, teachers, district leaders. And so we really tried to get that feedback reflected in the rubric. And all of the rubrics did get some updates and tweaks in language as we moved through that process prior to approval on April 11th, 2025. Okay. So a little bit of an overview on local classroom reviews in HB 1605, but let's dive into the actual shifts that occurred to support our work moving forward in 25-26. So on screen, you will see a summary of the 5 key shifts. There are some sub shifts that we'll talk about in just a minute, but these are the ones that are most notable for our ESC reviewer leads. The first one being, as I mentioned, the term academic review being replaced. And that will be replaced by local classroom reviews to align our terminology to the statute that we just looked at. The other piece, as I mentioned, the local classroom review rubrics were approved April 11th. All of them received some adjustments and updating based on public comment. But the most notable change was in the K3 foundational skills rubric. And so we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But the driving force behind that is that our state board really wanted to see very, very explicit language around the prohibition of 3Qing reflected in our rubric. The third big shift is that we are moving away from the externally hosted software, or ETL, and we're moving to an internally managed TEA solution for local classroom review. So we'll look into that just a little bit more. And then this is a big one, number 4, the local classroom review report. There are going to be some shifts to the report simply because the report has to be able to communicate to parents, number 1. It also has to be able to communicate to the districts that may or may not be involved in any of the bigger initiatives. So in other words, they have to be able to make meaning behind the report without necessarily being involved in an initiative. And then last but not least, as on our timeline, we named and stamped that in November 2024, we get our list of approved materials, which also has an impact on the local classroom review. So we'll talk about what those impacts might be moving forward in the summary here. So what we'll do is kind of engage with each shift one by one. So as I mentioned, the term academic review has been replaced. So for instance, if a Texas Strategic Leadership District is engaging in a review as part of the landscape analysis, that will be a local classroom review that they will be engaging in as part of the landscape analysis. If you have a campus that is engaging in a ESF targeted diagnostic, for instance, they will be participating in a local classroom review as part of that process. So we're really trying to streamline that all of the reviews, if it is part of an initiative, it will be referred to as a local classroom review, but local classroom review will also refer to a parent requested local classroom review, or remember, a district can also request a local classroom review. So really trying to streamline the name to align to the statute. As I mentioned, the second change is in the rubrics themselves. All received updates, but I definitely wanted to highlight in our short hour together the K-3 rubric in just a moment. And all of these updated rubrics, if you would like to have you and your team engage with those are hyperlinked when you get the deck. They're also on our TEA website so that you can take a look at those and see what has changed and what impact that might have. But definitely wanted to have everybody's eyes on the most notable change, which was the K-3 Foundational Literacy Skills rubric. As you can see on screen, the phonics compliance number 1 was added. And this is at the SBOE's request to make sure that we have very, very explicit language around the prohibition of 3Qing. So you will see that that is a completely new, that numeral was not in our foundational skills rubric last year. And so we really are going to engage with that deeply when we get to our face-to-face training this summer with our reviewers. Also want to point out here to the bottom left, you will know that you are looking at the approved rubrics by SBOE because it'll have this little footer here for you to reference on when it received SBOE approval. So if you have reviewers that have a marked up copy of a rubric, as I know many of us do, we'll want to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date rubrics that we get during training this summer. All right. And now on to the third shift. And this really has to do with where we're going to store our information in terms of our scoring and generate the report. So definitely want to spend just a little time here stamping what we're going to be using. So we are going to be using some smart sheets with other technology tools because it is new and it will be different. We made that part 3 of our software training so that we'll be doing that on Zoom. We know that schedules are extremely tight and everyone is so incredibly busy helping schools, but we want to make sure that everyone has line of sight to the software training. And the dates are going to be at the end of this presentation, so everybody can make sure that they have the dates to be able to prepare and plan. But this shift really is designed to do 2 things. Number 1, to get all of our initiatives and all of our ad hoc requests from parents and districts into one place. And the second thing is that as we move forward with this process is to align with the IMRA team because they also have some software that they use for their reviewers that we will be looking at moving forward. So really trying to integrate, streamline, automate so that we can do a good job of making sure that data is available to everyone in real time. But you will see the screenshot on the screen actually still holds the ability for someone to decline or approve a request. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But wanted to definitely put the screenshot up there as a reminder for the software training. Okay, moving on to the local classroom review report. And this is really the shift here is really to mark that most of our schools and parents will be making meaning from this report that is outside of an initiative. And so on screen, you can see just a flat screenshot of the title page. Want to name for us here that remember the 2 critical questions we're trying to answer are what was submitted during the local classroom review. Does it align to district adopted materials? So you can see in the local classroom review summary, the answer is going to be yes or no. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. And then the second question we have to answer for the local classroom review is, does this meet expectations for grade level rigor? And the answer is going to be yes or no. And so those, yes, that is standardized yes, no format is to help to bring clarity to parents and districts. Do want to name that a yes means that 75% or more of the assignments that were submitted actually align to what was adopted. We'll talk about that. A no means less than 75%. So that's something that we'll get deeper into during our face-to-face training where we're talking about scoring methodology, but want to name that here in case there are questions that might be surfacing for you in terms of what equals a yes and what equals a no. Also want to name for you here, as we mentioned, that the materials that are submitted for a local classroom review are going to be included. They will be included in the appendix, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But really prioritizing giving parents line of sight to a week's worth of material is something that was a driving force in terms of how this is designed. I also wanted to name for our ESC reviewer leads because I think it's really important in the commissioner's rules. Districts will be publishing the local classroom review reports on their district website within 10 days of receiving it. So do want to mention and name for all of our reviewers during face-to-face training and with our group this afternoon that the reports have always been very visible, but they will be even more visible now that we are moving to posting them on the district website, according to the commissioner's rules. All right. And then last but not least, and I think this is such a significant change to stamp here with this group, is really how the SBOE approved materials this impacts us in the local classroom reviews. And so I want to give you a moment to digest the information on screen here. And you can see to the left-hand side, if the school district that is under review is using materials that have not been reviewed by the IMRA process, then we are going to go ahead in the local classroom review and address both central questions, both driving questions. We're going to work with number one, is what was submitted aligned to the district or campus adopted materials? And does it meet grade appropriate rigor? And we're going to apply and leverage the SBOE approved rubrics to determine number two. And then you can see in that middle row number two, that if a school district is using the instructional materials on the IMRA list, we would only evaluate number one in the local classroom review. So we would not need to apply the rubrics to see if we have grade appropriate rigor, as that information has already been vetted by the quality reviewers on the IMRA process. So it eliminates the need for number two if we have SBOE approved materials. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment, but that is a pretty significant shift there. And then the third scenario that we will have is we have some of our school districts, if they are using materials that are on the rejected list from the SBOE, those requests are going to be automatically denied. And an IMRA report for those materials would be provided to the district as a very deep and comprehensive look at the quality of those materials has already been determined by the IMRA quality reviewers and rejected by the SBOE. So very significant shifts, I believe, on this slide in terms of how the reviews would move forward for 25-26. So for the local classroom review, we're really trying to align the review to the statute. So remember, those are those two questions. And those two questions, this time, same language, but highlighted in orange, so we can take a look at what those actually mean in terms of finding the answer, okay? So if we, as reviewers, are going to try to figure out if what was submitted corresponds with the materials adopted by the school district, where would we begin? And then we'll take a look also at number two. So let's dive into that really, really quickly here. And remember, those are our two central questions named in our objectives. This is what we're trying to find out in the review and be able to report back to districts and parents. And so as we dive into that, definitely want to summarize where those changes, where those takeaways, when we're aligning the review to those two key questions, where will you see that alignment happening? And that's actually on screen in these 5 places. Okay? And so the first place that you're going to see the alignment is we're going to have to use the certification of provision of instructional materials form. And that is formally known as the TEACS certification. For those of you who recently coming from the district or working to support districts, those are where the district actually certifies what materials they're going to use. It's submitted to the agency annually, and we'll talk more about that. We'll go one by one for each of these. Then the second place where we're aligning to the review is going to have to be to attend to the updates that were made in our local classroom review rubrics. Then, as I mentioned before, the third place you're going to see the alignment is going to be in answering the 2 questions on the actual review report, and we'll talk more about that. As I mentioned before, number 4, where we see alignment for really presenting transparent materials to parents for comprehending and seeing a week's worth of lesson materials. You're going to see that in the appendix, and that alignment occurring in number 4 there. And then last but not least, in number 5, the local classroom reviews. We're going to give some examples in terms of what is going to be scorable and what is non-scorable for the local classroom reviews. Many of us have had the opportunity to be testing coordinators previously prior to maybe your role now. And so we really wanted to use scorable and non-scorable, and we'll give you some examples in terms of what that looks like. But please remember the why behind this is to do our very best to provide the parents' line of sight into what's being used in the classroom in terms of instructional materials. So let's dive up to number 1 here, the certification of provision of materials form. And this is a very important form that actually districts are submitting right now to the agency, and it really is going to help us attend to number 1 here. So how are we going to determine if materials submitted correspond with what was adopted? And so on screen, you can see a screenshot of just the first page there. And this happens to be the reading language arts page. And this is where districts actually mark what they are using. For reading language arts, they also mark it for math, which would be the 2 places where local classroom reviews would be impacted. And you can also see that this particular form is submitted to us annually. So districts making changes from 24-25 to the 25-26 school year have an opportunity to identify those changes or updates. Or if there are no changes, of course, that can continue as well. And they submit it annually every year. And so this form is actually also really important because it's usually appears at a publicly noticed board meeting, which is really important as well. But this is the form we're going to use to determine if what was submitted for local classroom reviews aligns to what the districts have adopted. So on screen, you can just see a small example of what that might look like. So if we have, for instance, an assignment submitted on the left over there, and we know that the assignment source is Edmonton Study Island, and we know that from the cover page that was submitted, and also some of the markings on the assignment. And then we actually take a look at what was adopted in mathematics K-5 for 25-26 by that particular school district. And they do, in fact, have adopted Edmonton Study Island as approved materials. And so when those 2 things match, we would be able to say yes. When we are answering the question number 1 for the local classroom reviews, does the assignment correspond to the material adopted in the district? So just a small example. On the flip side, something opposite could be true, where we're trying to ask ourselves, once again, does this assignment submitted correspond to the materials adopted in the district? So you can see on the left-hand side, we have something from Splash Learn, and it does not correspond to what was adopted by K-5. And so in that particular case, the answer would be no, this does not correspond to what was adopted by the district. So just 2 examples. Of course, when we get to face-to-face training, we're going to be going over these in a little bit more detail. But for this group, in our brief time together, I wanted you to have some examples that were concrete to work from as we begin to prepare our teams and in our schools and our school communities for the local classroom reviews. Okay, so it brings us to number 2. And remember, we're aligning our review to the statute. And so let's take a look at the particular SBOE approved rubrics. And we are going to leverage those rubrics to help us with the number 2 there in orange to help us determine grade level rigor. And so really wanted to kind of follow the same pattern here, just visually give us something all to concrete, give us something very concrete to work with. But if we had that assignment submitted over there to the left, and we were asking ourselves as reviewers, which those are the 2 questions we're going to ask ourselves as reviewers, does the assignment submitted meet the level of rigor for the essential knowledge and skills? You'll see the approved rubric for K-12 over here to the right-hand side. And so definitely want to name and stamp. In this particular case, the reviewer says yes to this particular assignment. On the flip side, we also have an ELR 4 through 8 reading comprehension example where we get all about helicopters turned in from the worksheet zone. And the reviewer says, no, the answer to this question of does it meet grade level rigor? No, it does not. And so that's really what we're reporting on is the alignment, right, to district materials, and then to leverage the rubrics to determine grade level rigor. So a few brief examples to help us there. Next, we want to turn our attention to number 3. How are we going to see the alignment of the review in the local classroom review report? And so really want to mention here, we're answering those 2 questions, yes or no. Yes, meaning greater than 75%. No, meaning less than 75%. You will also see down below that you will get a yes or a no for the rigor review summary. So in this particular case, the set of assignments that were evaluated received a no for text-based responses. So that's recorded there. But for all that were involved in the spring semester in terms of giving feedback, felt really strongly that the report has to be able to answer question 1 and question 2 very, very directly for parents and districts. All right. You will also see that we have the summary statements, and I know that that was actually a feature of the 24-25 review. Some of the summary statements they've been automated, and we are going to be able to populate the summary statements for reading language arts and also mathematics in the report, really driving at the answers to these 2 orange questions here on screen. Okay, and so the next 2 here on our overall summary, the appendix. So remember, the appendix is where we're gathering the actual materials from the classroom that will be evaluated, blank student assignments, but also a week's worth of lesson materials so parents have line of sight into what's being used in the classroom. And so I really wanted to stamp for us here, and this is a screenshot of what the appendix will look like of the report. And you can see that Appendix 1 features the documents submitted for the local classroom review. And when we select this link, what's going to pop up are an appendix that is organized into 2 sections. Section 1 is going to be blank student assignments that are going to be the scoreable materials, what the evaluator actually looked at to render the score report of yes or no. The second thing that's going to appear are the non-scoreable materials, and that's basically everything else that was gathered in that week's worth of materials. So definitely want to highlight that, as that is a pretty big change, but really something that as we engaged with stakeholders in the spring, that there were some strong feelings in really being able to see a week's worth of material and being able to publish that back to our parents. In addition, you'll also see that Appendix 2 is going to feature the approved rubrics for local classroom reviews, so parents and districts have access to that. As I mentioned, the scoring methodology, which we're going to go over when we get to our face-to-face training, there's going to be a hyperlink to that as well, so everyone understands. what the yes and the no means. In addition, Appendix 4 is going to have a hyperlink to the EMRA process. And Appendix 5 will feature the glossary so that we can have some line of sight into any words that might need further definition to make meaning of the results. Okay. So as I mentioned, as we're looking at number 5 here, we're looking at local classroom reviews having scoreable and non-scoreable materials. And you can see down there that as we're gathering this week's worth of lesson materials, that's going to include things like teacher guides, exit tickets, bell ringers, etc. All of those will be non-scoreable and organized in the appendix, but will be important to share back to parents so that they know what their children were engaging with for that particular week. So wanted to give you an example here on screen in terms of what that might look like. So for a scoreable material is any of the assignments where the reviewer used the rubrics to render the score. On the right-hand side, the teacher-facing materials, really anything else that supplements what was going on besides the assignments. The teacher can assemble those. And in that submission, those will be non-scoreable and assembled in the actual appendix. All right, so in terms of really diving in and taking a look at the specific components of the local classroom review and how things are going to be reported, we really wanted to try to name and stamp some of those major shifts. And you're looking at the summary after going through just a little bit of the information together, but wanted to name and stamp these particular pieces for us early on in the summertime before we get to the face-to-face environment. Great. So I think when we're taking a look at the actual impacts of aligning the review to those two central questions and to the statute, there are definitely lots of layers to that in terms of reporting, which we'll be happy to dive into, like I say, when we get to face-to-face training. But I didn't want to leave you this afternoon because I know time is of the essence and it's so very, very valuable, but to also name that our stakeholders, our SBOE members, they were definitely really, really interested in how we were establishing subject matter expertise for our reviewers and really wanting to weigh in and as much as we can, really to highlight some of the similarities. They were very, very familiar with the EMRA reviewer process and to see what elements of that process could actually transfer over to our local classroom reviewer. So wanted to spend just a few moments engaging with some of the processes for the reviewers. So definitely want to give you, because there are some changes here that I wanted to name and stamp for the group. And sort of an overview that we're looking at, and we'll go through one by one, is the actual review process. And so some things are the same and some things might be different. So when we take a look at step 1, the local classroom reviewers are going to receive a notification from Smartsheet that a review has been assigned. And then they have the ability to say yes or no to deny the request. Do want to mention that those processes are very similar to what we've experienced previously. Also want to mention step 3 is where we will see the definitely want to stamp a change or a shift as we move forward to 25-26, because all of the assignment submissions are going to be scored by 2 TEA certified ESC reviewers. So each set of assignments is going to be evaluated by 2 reviewers. So I think that's really, really important because that means that if we evaluated 20,000 assignments, for instance, right, that we would be evaluating that amount of assignments twice. And so that means probably that your reviewers would be doing more reviews. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. The second part of number 3 is equally important because those 2 certified ESC reviewers are going to be engaged in a blind scoring process. And all we're trying to discuss here is that the reviewer will not know the campus or the district that the assignments are associated with. And so that's a particularly Another shift here on number 3, step 3, that we really wanted to stamp for everyone on the call. So 2 reviewers per assignment and also or submission, and then that we're going to have a blind scoring process to ensure that we are as objective as we can be about everything that we're engaging with and how we're applying the rubrics. For step number 4, and we're going to talk more about this in depth in just a moment, that the assignments, if there is a non-adjacent score assigned to the collection, we are going to assign that assignment or assignment collection to a third reviewer. And so we really want to make sure that we have clear and consistent scoring statewide, particularly because we have our parents and our districts and we have reports that are going to be published on district websites. We want to make sure that we have clear and consistent scoring across the board. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then, of course, step 5, where we're generating the report and being able to share that back to the districts. So we will unpack each of these one by one. So step 1, we said that the local classroom reviewer is going to receive a notification that a review has been assigned. And so you'll see a screenshot of what that will look like. You'll see on the screenshot that that reviewer will either receive an email that says they are reviewer 1 for that particular collection or reviewer 2. Either way, the assignments will be the same. And so they will receive that notification and have 48 hours to say, yes, I approve, or no, I deny. If we have a dormant request out there, we definitely will automatically reassign to another reviewer to make sure that we're meeting our particular timelines in terms of turnaround to a parent, to a district, and some of our initiatives, as most of you are well aware, particularly when we are working with our ESF targeted diagnostic groups. October has a tendency to be very, very, very busy for everyone involved. And so we want to make sure that our reviewers have enough time to be able to make the evaluation using the rubrics. And so, as I mentioned before, the campus and district information would not be visible to reviewers during the scoring process. The other thing that I want to mention is that reviewers will score submissions from various regions across the state. And so everyone will have a chance to be able to engage with assignment collections, the assembly of an assignment collection from across the state, to make sure that we are objectively evaluating our assignment collections. Okay. As I mentioned before, if a reviewer declines the request, that's fine. We will send it back out to someone else. And we also want to make sure to highlight, and this is where the subject matter expertise and the objectivity of our scores really plays loudly again, as we want to make sure that we're assigning reviews to the current teacher certification areas that our reviewers have. So as you know, if you have been engaging with the TEA Learn course in the pre-registration, we are definitely taking a look at teacher certifications to make sure that aligns with what's being reviewed. And really remember the why behind that being the subject matter expertise is playing really loudly in terms of our requirements from the statutory requirements. As I mentioned, step 3 is where we have some shifts to the 25-26 process. And so wanted to outline a little bit more about those here for you. Definitely reviewer 1 will be assigning scores to the assignments independently, as will reviewer 2. So each reviewer will score the same assignments. They'll score them independently. When those scores come in, what we're going to do is do what's called the scoring reconciliation in the system. And our partners will recognize this for sure. When we're doing a scoring reconciliation, if both scorers score that indicator exactly, then that's the score that we'll post. So that's what you see in row number 1. So if reviewer 1 scores indicator 1.1 a 2, and reviewer 2 scores indicator 1.1 a 2, then the score that we'll post, right, would be the 2. If we have an adjacent score, where scorer 1 may have said 0 and scorer 2 actually said 1, then we're going to average the scores from the two scores. And so I definitely want to, or pardon me, the two reviewers. So I want to make sure that everybody understands exact and adjacent scores will get one treatment. However, if we have two reviewers assigning scores at both the lowest and the highest performance levels of the rubric, then we're going to escalate that. That's non-adjacent scoring, and there's something that we need to look to more deeply. Any non-adjacent scores, because there are the indicators that we really need to take a look at, are going to be assigned to a third reviewer. And so really want to name and stamp that here, that the scoring reconciliation process will happen, so that we know that we are posting clear and consistent scoring across the state. And we wanted the ability to be able to do this in real time, right? So we want to we want to be able to compare scores prior to generating the report and sharing that back with districts and parents. And then you can see on the final bullet there, also naming and stamping the blind scoring process, really amplifying the subjectivity and also amplifying our subject matter expertise of our reviewers. So from that particular point, remember those are the shifts, blind scoring and being assessed by two reviewers. Wanted to name for you in step 4, we're talking about this third reviewer. So remember, any assignment collection with one non-adjacent score is going to be assigned a third score. The second scenario where the third score will get involved is if we have an assignment collection where both reviewers where we have 4 or more adjacent scores. And we really want to keep a very tight watch on what's happening with the third scorer so that we can intervene if there are questions or if we need additional clarification regarding the assignment collection. But I will name that the submission criteria are also going to play a pretty big role here, because we want to make sure that we actually have our reviewers engaged with assignments that meet the submission criteria to give ourselves a really good chance at applying the rubrics effectively and according to their design. Okay, and so in terms of generating the report, and we've looked at several screenshots, but we want to bring them back up just so everyone has a chance to engage with them several times throughout our time together this afternoon. We really wanted to name and stamp, remember that the report is going to answer the questions very directly about alignment to district adopted materials and grade level rigor. And then you can see if we're only evaluating one particular subject area in that review, that will be in blue. And if it was not scored because it wasn't submitted for whatever reason, because remember, a parent review is very different. They might only submit math, or they might only submit, right, language arts for consideration. And so if it is not scored, it will be grayed out so that it's very clear that was not part of the evaluation. Definitely want to name, right, the training requirements. So many of you, and we want to thank you for you and your teams have committed the pre-registration form for training. That was kind of the first step. And then right now we have part 1 happening where our reviewers are engaging in the TEA Learn course. And so we also know that many staffing changes and things move around during the summer, or you may have new hires or things like that. So we're trying to be sure that we have opportunities for everyone to engage in the process. So the TEA Learn course is part 1, and it's the prep training for local classroom reviewers. Then you can see that we're moving to part 2, which will be the rubric deep dives and evidence guides. And just want to thank many on the call who are helping us get all the resources updated to reflect the changes in the rubrics and the changes in the shifts that we're discussing in all of our documents and things that are going out for us to use in the 25-26 school year. You will see that at the end of the TEA Learn course, there's the opportunity to register for the part 2 training, which we have being held at 4 different ESCs throughout the summer. So we wanted to get those dates and just stamp those for you. And we are really looking forward to seeing everyone this summer as we are moving around ESC 20, ESC 13, ESC 4, and ESC 10. I want to thank those ESCs for hosting us and hosting our group so we can engage in our deep dives and evidence guides throughout the summer. As I mentioned, part 3 of the training is going to be the software training. We are using Smartsheets and some other tools that we want to be able to introduce to everyone and engage everyone over Zoom, so there wouldn't be any travel required, and those dates are listed there. And so that would be the final part of the training before we meet all requirements to become a certified reviewer. I also want to mention that there are going to be some calibration sessions. Obviously, with us having 2 reviewers, there's going to be opportunities for us to calibrate, as there always, we always have opportunities to improve our practice. And so we'll be sharing more with you on that during the face-to-face training. But definitely do want to stamp that the requirements and the training requirements and all the things that we need to do to prepare our reviewers have been stamped in the commissioner's rules as well. As I mentioned, just establishing subject matter expertise in the areas in which everyone is reviewing. Added this, the slide should look dangerously similar to the previous one, except that part 2 training is highlighted there in orange. And really, as the leads, just helping direct everyone to the training that best fits, because you know what's going on and what everyone's engaged with at your ESCs. I know training is extremely, the training calendars are extremely busy in the summer, but wanted to really highlight for us here the virtual trainings are to support any new hires you may have, or to support folks who might be doing dual certification. So if you have someone that is incredibly gifted and can do math and ELAR, they may attend the math face-to-face with us and then come back for the virtual training in the other content area. And so that they would only have to attend 1 in-person training. And so right now, every ESC has 2 reserved seats for that virtual training, and just wanted you to be able to, A, be aware that that's there, and B, to be able to, we're asking our reviewers to consult with you, the ESC lead, in terms of who those 2 spots should be saved for before we are reserving a seat for the ESC. So definitely looking to for your leadership and counsel to the group on that attendance during the virtual training. Definitely want to name and stamp the requirements one more time. So the bachelor's degree, the teaching license in the content area they seek to review, looking for experience in that content area, the RB's training, and those are all things that we're gathering in the TEA Learn course, because we have to have a database of all of those things to be able to share with our stakeholders. And then really number 5, guys, is incredibly important because we cannot have our reviewers have a financial interest or be employed by a publisher or any entity with financial interest in the adoption of instructional materials in the previous 3 years. And so when we get to face-to-face training, and I put this here for our ESC review leads, simply because when we get to the face-to-face training, we all will be signing a conflict of interest form. But that is incredibly important to put front and center, especially if you have, I know you have incredibly talented folks at your ESC that may be doing other work outside the ESC even. And so we really want to make sure that's, you have your eyes on that and know what to expect when we get to face-to-face training. So particularly important, number 5 there. And then really, in terms of the role of local classroom reviewer, we're going to make every effort to provide the best training environment. As I said, we are so excited to see everyone so that everyone can become a certified local reviewer. We really want to make sure we're scoring according to the rubrics. Is that something that we're going to have to be reporting out on frequently? We want to make sure that we're using the Smartsheet system to record the score and summary statements. And then the biggest piece is just making sure we have scoring and reporting that's accurate so that it's going out to the schools and out to our parents in a comprehensible format, and that we can really feel good about what it's communicating to our parents and our stakeholders. So The role of the local classroom reviewer is really still the same in terms of really producing quality, clear and consistent quality scoring for everyone involved in the local classroom review process. One thing that is not changing is that we will continue to, each ESC will continue to invoice, pardon me, and be reimbursed by Region 7 for local classroom reviews for the 25-26 school year. The difference is it's going to be at $1,000 per review. So you will notice that is a decrease from the previous amount in 24-25. Couple reasons for that. The first one being the why was the price changed? The first one being that each submission is going to be scored by 2 reviewers. So one assignment submission, right, would be at $2,000, so $1,000 per reviewer. The other piece is because, remember, if we have an SBOE, if the district is using SBOE approved materials, we would only be checking for alignment in that particular review. So we really wanted to name and stamp those particular pieces as we are looking at really implementing escalating to a 3rd reviewer. If we find that someone their scoring is not according to rubric, we really want to pay attention to how we're assembling the appendix pieces and really looking towards sponsoring reviews in lots of different scenarios. So we will still continue to engage with district-wide reviews. Some of them will be both the rigor and the alignment. Some of the district-wide reviews would only be alignment. And those are the ad hoc requests that are coming in from the HB 1605 requested reviews. And so we really want to name, the same would be true for campuses. We could have a campus review that is for rigor and alignment, or one that is only alignment. And then on the parent level, we could have a classroom review that just looks at the alignment to district adopted materials. And we could also have a classroom review that really addresses and drives at the rigor and alignment pieces of the local classroom review. So both of those are in play in terms of what we're looking at for the review, and wanted all of our ESC leads to know that it is $1,000 per review, but you probably can expect, right, if we're going to be reviewing twice for every assignment, that there will be a lot of work stream coming to our reviewers, and especially as we're looking at engaging in the fall, supporting our initiatives and supporting the additional ad hoc requests from parents and districts. And then, Victoria, that way we have more time for questions, if that's okay, because this time with our wonderful partners here goes quickly as always. And so I did want to call your attention to a couple of things. The first one is I have hyperlinked our TEA local classroom review page on this particular deck so that you can get there quickly and easily. And let me see here, and I'll drop it in the chat before we log off. And the reason that's important is that's where we're going to be posting really important information. We have some ESC facing information, but we also have parent and district facing information. So really want to invite you to join. And this is actually, let me take join back, Victoria. I have clearly not had enough iced tea. Let me invite you to tune in to 2 posted webinars. So on June 25th, we will have a local classroom reviews overview for LEAs posted on our local classroom reviews page by June 25th. And we made them asynchronous on purpose because we know that our schedules are incredibly busy. And so you could take the opportunity when you maybe have 15 minutes and 15 minutes available on several different days, because it's really hard to get everyone together. Also want to invite you to view the posted webinar that's going to be an overview for our parents. And so both of those you should look for on our local classroom reviews page. And we're planning some additional things moving forward. I would also mention that the local classroom reviews were featured in the May 29th superintendent call. So there are slides associated with that. If you would like to reference those, be happy to send you the link for those as well. And also want to mention that there was a May 29th to the administrator address communication that went out from TEA regarding local classroom reviews. And I would also mention, last one, is that we have been sharing some information with this CCRS group, with the executive directors at each ESC regarding local classroom reviews. And of course, our time together this afternoon to try to make sure we get some specific communication that is really pertinent to our ESCs out to you as fast as we can. So a lot of communication coming out, and just want to make sure that you are aware where to find it, and that you have access to it, both for yourself and your broader teams as we support the work moving forward. So definitely want to invite you to tune into those webinars. They're asynchronous. It should be super easy to find some chunks of time to be able to engage with that.